So the long wait is finally over. Games Workshop are releasing the Astra Militarum. There's going to be rather a lot of guard kits going up for pre-order at the end of this week. Let's talk prices for the Rogal Dorn and everything else. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today I thought we'd take a quick look through Games Workshop's pre-orders for the week. A whole bunch of guard kits are going up for sale, the prices are unveiled, and as well as a bunch of stuff that we knew, there are a few other interesting things, like a couple of reboxings and return of a character. So these guard kits will be going up for pre-order on Saturday the 21st of January. It means they'll actually be on general sale on the 28th. It is rather a big guard kit release. For the headlines today, there's a Guard Codex, Lord Solar Leontus, Ursula Creed, the Cadian Shock Troops, Cadian Command Squad, and Cadian Heavy Weapons, the Mighty Rogal Dorn, Field Ordnance Batteries, Sentinels, and a couple of reboxings, including a Baneblade and the Leman Russ tank. The Baneblade gets extra sponsons, the Leman Russ gets all the guns in the same kit now, which I think is quite a nice move. Then we've got a kind of new Primaris Psyker in the re-release of Aradia Madellen, who was a Blackstone Fortress character. Now it looks like she's going to be representing the generic Primaris Psyker kit, and also the Guard Dice and Datacards. Despite being a rather mammoth release for the Imperial Guard, this isn't everything that is to come. I feel like we know the vast majority of Guard kits at the moment, and these are the ones that appear to be missing from this release wave. We still have to wait on the Rough Riders, the Cadian getting their individual kill team release. There's no combat patrol box here yet, although we do know the contents of it. The Cadian Castellan doesn't appear to be here, nor does the new Commissar, and nor does the Cadian upgrade sprue with that tank commander or the Aegis defense line. I'd guess that they're going to have a second release wave maybe a week or two later. I feel in particular Cadian are kits that Games Workshop really should get around to releasing soon, very much in demand with their strong new rules in the Codex. Some of them are going for pretty crazy prices on eBay for the few people that got them from that kill team box. Let's go through the releases in order, talk about the prices and the models in general. First up, and in pride of place amongst the releases, is the final general release of Codex Astra Militarum. Really nice to see that this has finally turned up in full. It's been quite a while since the Cadia Stands box went up. Kind of annoying that Guard have been left in limbo for quite so long between the two. Not officially recommended by Games Workshop for match play games and things, as the Codex was kind of like a pre-sale from the Cadia Stands box. Good that people will be able to get their hands on it a bit more widely again, and it should trigger a few other things. If there's an FAQ coming for the Guard Codex, then we'll get that. Plus it means that events will start allowing them in tournaments more widely, so we'll be able to see a few more Guard tournament lists. I must admit I'm maybe just a little bit apprehensive as to how short the shelf life of this book might be. We don't know whether Games Workshop's going to pull a hard reset for the whole game of 40k in 6 or 7 months' time. If they choose to revert things back to indexes, then this book might not have the longest shelf life in the world. The rules are pretty exciting though. Guard are perhaps looking like one of the top tier armies in 40k right now. I feel like they're going to be very, very strong going into this new Arcs of Omen meta. Next up, a couple of characters, Lord Solar Leontus and Ursula Creed, both of which are maybe models that got a bit of a mixed reception. Lord Solar I think does look the part, but is maybe just a bit different to the rest of the Guard aesthetic. Very much a High Lord of the Imperium as opposed to any sort of Guard general. Ursula Creed has kind of got a big boots and greatcoat to fill, basically replacing one of the Guard's most iconic characters. Lord Solar's £35, €45 or $60, and honestly that's a little bit on the expensive side compared with what I was expecting. I thought he might be a bit cheaper than that, maybe more in line with the Chaplain on Bike or Beast Boss on Squigosaur. Really I feel that's a fairly steep price for a single cavalry miniature. I feel like we'll probably get a bunch of people converting him, as we have been seeing already while they've been waiting for his release. Ursula Creed I think is also on the expensive side for a single infantry miniature. She's £27.50, €35 or $45. Admittedly kind of in line with Games Workshop's usual special character offering. She's the same price as Lilith Hesprax, for example. I suspect I'll just be running standard Creed's miniature in her place, maybe having to update it to a slightly bigger base. Moving on, we've got the Cadian Shock Troops, £30, €40 or $50, certainly a bit more than the kit that they replaced. If you don't mind the aesthetic of the Caschans, then they are now very significantly cheaper than these, at only £21 or $35. I feel like they've done the new kit nicely, maybe not being too much of a jarring contrast with the old miniatures, though they do look quite a bit more detailed and refined than the old ones, and the body proportions are a bit more in line with normal humans, as opposed to the Cadians' heroic kind of scaling that they had going on before, with very big heads and hands. Currently they're pretty much the best troops choice in Codex Astra Militarum. They come with 2 different special weapons in the kits that you can take any of a few of. Though to be honest, if you just want to use the datasheet, I feel like no one would usually stop you from just running any single Guard regiment miniatures that you had along, and just saying that these are the squads that count as the Cadian datasheet. Next up we've got the updated Cadian Command Squad. I'd say out of the miniatures, I feel like these were perhaps slightly lower priority for the guard ones. I guess they wanted to redo them as they were doing the standard guard infantry line, and they didn't want some of the new and old miniatures looking a bit weird with the scaling next to each other perhaps. They've got the options for a Master Vox, Medic, and Banner, plus an Officer, and then some special gear for the extra Trooper or the Sergeant. Really quite a good flexible kit, and again currently a very, very competitive unit in game. The Finial standard is just absolutely amazing for buffing any core shooting, and they're quite handy to have around for inflexible command as well, as they can mean that your infantry squads count as in range if they're anywhere near the Vox. These guys will be in the combat patrol box, the same as the Cadian shock troops. I believe that the setup for the combat patrol is very similar to the Cadia stands box. A command squad, 2 sets of shock troops, a sentinel, and some field ordnance. Price-wise, I really don't think they're too bad. They're a little bit cheaper than that Dark Commune squad that they had for the Chaos Space Marines. I was expecting them to be kind of equivalent, as they're basically a similar sort of equivalent unit. Again, for a cheaper route, if you wanted to stay direct from Games Workshop, the Cadian squad exists as well. A much more dated kit, but nicer than the rank and file Cadians, I think. That one's only £21, so is significantly less. Next up, we've got the Cadian heavy weapons, £30, €40, or $50. It does appear that, as expected, there are just 3 of them in the box. They did do a slightly confusing picture release earlier where they showed off all 5 of the different options within the same photo. There are definitely just 3 of them though, as you'd expect. Again, like the command squad, pretty much just updated because they were redoing the main Cadians, I think. They do look nicer than before and have a few good accessories. They did make the base size smaller, which is kind of annoying if you've got a bunch of the old ones. And they are a little bit weird in that you can model guys with Voxcasters, but they don't actually have the option for taking them in-game for some reason. Overall, for their game rules though, they are just a little bit depressingly fragile, still with just the 2 wounds at regular guardsman profiles. It means the direct line of sight weapons are just a bit too easy to kill in my opinion. Probably the strongest way to field them is in squads of mortars, give them take aim, and just stack a few saves on enemy units across the board. Next up, we've got perhaps the highlight of the whole release, which is the Rogal Dorn battle tank, £55, €70, which should equate to around about $90. I'd say price-wise, as far as Games Workshop goes, that could be worse. A Space Marine Gladiator tank I think is fairly significantly smaller than this, and that one's £52.50. I honestly wouldn't have been surprised if they'd put this one up just a little bit more. The tank's a big heavy tank with toughness 9 and 17 wounds. It is bigger than the Russ by quite a large portion. I feel like both of them are usable in game, though probably the Russ still has the competitive edge in my opinion. I feel like it might be the sort of tank that maybe you just want one of in the battle line to put some big buffs on, and then you have some Russes to make up the bulk of the armour. Generally speaking, I think it was quite well received. A fairly flexible kit with a choice of turrets, plus a whole bunch of weapons and sponsons. I have a feeling that quite a lot of guard players are looking forward to getting their hands on these, and they'll probably sell quite well. Next up, we've got the Field Ordnance batteries. These ones are £32.50, €42.50, or $55, more or less in line with what I was expecting. Might have been nice if they'd just been a little bit cheaper perhaps. I feel like they're perhaps one of the more exciting models out of the new guard release, basically bigger, badder, heavy weapon teams with a choice of the mini Earthshaker cannon, the multi-shot rockets, or the heavy las cannons. They don't really seem to be particularly strong in game though, to be honest. Their firepower is kind of comparable with things like Leman Russ's or Rogal Dorn's, while being significantly less manoeuvrable. These will also be coming in the combat patrol box, so if you did want some of them, then perhaps holding off for that might not be the worst idea, as you could get them at a discount if you want command squads and Cadian shock troops as well. Pretty cool miniatures though, and of course with game rules changing quite regularly these days, there's every chance they might get better in the future. Next up, we've got the trusty Sentinel, £27.50, €35, or $45. These things now appear to be one of the most competitive units in the Guard Codex. They're very tough for the cost, and their firepower isn't dreadful when you can put some pretty massive buffs on them. The kit builds either the Scout Sentinel or the Armoured Sentinel. I think it's quite a nice update on the previous one, which was simple and effective, but this one maybe looks like it's a bit more of a fully thought through vehicle. And price-wise, I'd say this is actually not too terrible. Games Workshop sold the last one, which was a very old kit, for £24, and considering it's a new plastic vehicle from them, I was probably expecting £30 or above, so a slight win here perhaps. Of course, with how cheap they are in game, they're still really quite bad deals if you just want points of guard on the table per the dollar. If you field them in their most basic loadouts, then you're getting less than 1 point per dollar here. Some of the worst values in Warhammer 40k if you just want to get loads of points on the board as quickly as possible for as least money. Perhaps not the most unusual thing in the world, Guard tend to be a very expensive army to collect. Next up, we've got a couple of interesting reboxings. First up, we've got the Baneblade, £100, €130, or $170. That was previously £90 in the UK at least, so a £10 increase there. The reason that they've decided to rebox this is so it comes with an extra sprue of sponsons. Previously, in the one before, I believe you only got the 2 sponsons, whereas in the previous Codex it used to have the option to have 0, 2 or 4. In the current Codex, they've made the first set of sponsons completely free and included, so it always makes sense to have at least some now. Pretty helpful that if you want more though, you won't have to be searching around for other Baneblade kits. In terms of in-game power, I'd probably still rate it a bit behind the Russes and the Rogal Dorns with the synergies and tank orders that they can get. And as well as that, perhaps one of the most big limiting factors on the board is that it's just an absolutely enormous size. On a lot of tables with densish terrain, there might be a lot of places that it just can't fit through. Overall, a little bit more expensive if you wanted a Baneblade. At least you are getting more options in the box for it though, I suppose. The other reboxing is for the Leman Russ battle tank itself. This one's now £37.50, €50 or $65, and this one I think is actually really quite a helpful rebox, as it means that you've got all the guns in the same kit, rather than just having half of them. Previously, you either picked up the standard Leman Russ, which gave you the Vanquisher, regular battle cannon, Exterminator or Eradicator, or you had to pick up the Demolisher type kit, which gave you the Demolisher cannon, Executioner plasma cannon, and Punisher Gatling cannon. For people who wanted to do a bit of magnetising and chopping and changing options, it meant it was just a little bit awkward to get a hold of. I think it is quite nice just from a buyer's perspective that you'd be able to have all the guns in there, and then you can arm it with whatever set that you like, and not have to worry about exactly which of the kits you're picking up and which options you want access to. Previously in the UK it was £36, so going up to £37.50 I don't think is the worst thing in the world. For me, I feel like the extra £1.50 is worth it to get access to all the weapons. I would certainly recommend if you're collecting guards, then having a magnetised Leman Russ is going to be something that you can just fall back on over and over again. It's really nice to be able to flexibly adapt all the loadouts to changing rules. Next up, we've got a re-release of a Primaris Psyker. It looks like the old one on the right is going to be replaced, as he was a resin miniature, and it looks like the new Primaris Psyker that's going to be the generic option for the guard is this one on the left, representing Iradian Medellin, a character from Blackstone Fortress, but now being made into a generic pick much in the same way as the Abmech Techno-Archaeologist was. The older one had been one of those victims of Games Workshop's range rotation, where they take things away and don't bring them back for a while. I guess they'll be replaced by the new one, seeing as she's a newer plastic kit, and Games Workshop does seem to be basically declaring war on all of its resin kits and trying to get them gone as soon as possible. Miniatures wise, I think it looks cool enough. I guess a bit more dynamic posing than the one on the right. I feel like maybe the one on the right just has a bit more of a military type vibe as opposed to a generic 40k Psyker type model, though I suspect there'll be some people who prefer one miniature or the other. In any case, pricing wise, they're £19, €24, which should equate to around about $31. Obviously, I still think that that's really quite expensive for just a single Games Workshop miniature, but I suppose as character releases go, it could be worse. Definitely a lot cheaper than New Creed, for example. Finally, we've got some gaming accessories, the dice and the data cards. The Astra Militarum dice are £22, €29 and $35. I feel like Games Workshop maybe is just trying to push it to see just how few dice they can sell for just how much money and get away with it. They do look quite nice. They've got the Imperial Guard symbol on the 6. They're actually a couple of pounds cheaper than some of their previous dice offerings, but they've dropped the number of dice down from 20 to 15, which I feel like really is just a bit on the stingy side. If you did happen to have, say, a squad of 10 guys with las guns, you wouldn't be able to resolve the entire shooting with them, though I guess with the way that the squads are set up at the moment, you might be taking a few special weapons. Otherwise, the data cards are their normal offering, £17, €22 or $29, in line with all the others. Might well be worth checking eBay and things just in case anyone's getting rid of them out of their Cadia stands box. I feel like there's likely to be at least a few spare ones floating around. So overall, rather a lot of guard stuff there. I'd say perhaps some good news and some bad news on a pricing front. I feel like Lord Solar and New Creed certainly feel pretty much on the expensive side for Games Workshop miniatures, whereas perhaps the Cadian Command Squad, the Rogal Dorn tank and the Sentinels are perhaps just a little bit less expensive than I might have expected Games Workshop might have asked for them, though it's not going to change Guard from being a fairly expensive army to collect. I do think that the Leman Russ repackaging is quite a good move as well, pretty handy not to be bothering with 2 different kits and just have all the options in one. Let me know your thoughts on them in any case. Which of this would you be thinking about picking up or not doing so? And have the prices had any sway in your decision? If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'm sure we'll be talking more Guard on the channel at some stage, so feel free to stay tuned for more. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention as well that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find that links down in the video description if you're interested. The channel's Patreon is what allows me to keep on making videos like this every day, and I do try and give a few benefits to people who support, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.